Like, they'll go out of their way to find the, like, 2D transitioners that want to be interviewed and then interview them for 2 hours about their experience. And it's like, you pick the smallest of the smallest groups to talk to about. I don't know, I just find that amusing. Meanwhile, they won't interview the countless trans people who are happy with their transition and have no thoughts or desires to detransition, or the trans people who still identify as trans, who did technically detransition, things like that. They're just so concerned with us. It's so funny. Who wants fresh biscuits? I came across a TikTok of a cat making biscuits on its owner's face, which was very fun. It's upsetting that I can't get it, that I am allergic to cats. It's quite upsetting. Because, you know, because they'd be so much easier to care for in a apartment setting than a dog. But, you know. It's fucking annoying. Because in order to get a cat, I'd have to, like, go to a breeder and get a specific breed of cat that doesn't, you know, like, you know, create the enzyme or whatever that people are allergic to. Can we just watch Fox? Watch some Fox News. I don't know if I've got any good Fox News saved. I'm sure there's one in here. Oh, Fox coverage on the shooting? I mean, I'm not too interested in the shooting, if I'm being honest with you. I couldn't care less about it, which is kind of sad, but that's the world that I live in, so, you know, like... Especially because Fox is just going to talk about the person being trans and how them being trans should have disqualified them for ever having a gun and, you know, shit like that. Let's see. Apparently.
Now emerging about the Nashville elementary school massacre. And we're getting new images of dramatic body cam footage showing Nashville police officers risking their lives to go toward the shooting. That's what heroes do.
No, that's just their fucking job. That's just their fucking job. I don't know. That's just their job. I'm sorry. I'm just tired of us being like, oh, they're such heroes for just doing their fucking job. Like, that's literally... Like, we don't praise firefighters every time they run into a burning building because that's their job, you know?
School shooter. Police say that deadly attack was calculated and
Am I glad
planned,
they did their job? Absolutely.
But they didn't reveal the answer to
but it shouldn't be some, like, unique experience to see cops doing their job, you know?
Why?
Because we don't have any gun reform in this fucking country.
I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-hosts Emily Campagno and Kaylee McEnany. Also joining us, board-certified radiologist and Fox News contributor Dr. Nicole Saphier.
What does her
And
being a
here,
radiologist
for the
have to
very
do with
first
anything?
time, Kevin O'Leary, chairman of
Ew.
O'Leary Ventures. And we
Disgusting.
look forward to getting to know him better this hour. Police identified the shooter as Audrey Hale, a 28-year-old former student at that school who recently began identifying as transgender. We're learning Hale was armed with 2 assault.
Oh yeah, that's something that should be mentioned as well. People assume that that trans people just don't own guns, which just isn't true. Like, there's a whole subsection of trans people who are like massively pro-gun. So you know,
Style weapons and a handgun. They also found a detailed map of the school along with Hale's manifesto. Although the FBI.
Oh wow, these captions are way off. Dear Lord.
Has yet to reveal the contents of that manifesto. Chilling images show Audrey Hale blasting through a side door of the school just after 10 a.m. local time yesterday morning.
I'm just going to turn off the captions because they're not correct.
Through the hallways while opening fire. It lasted 14 minutes. It ended when 2 quick-acting police officers took her out. These are new images from their body cam video showing the seconds leading up to the moment when police shot her. We see officers with guns drawn.
I just think it's interesting that they mention that this person recently started identifying as trans and then still continues to use she, her pronouns instead of just being safe and using they. But, I mean, it doesn't matter that much. I just find it weird that they would bother to mention the fact that this person identifies as trans. You know what I mean?
Entering the school, checking each classroom before moving
and
to
then
the hallways
continuing to
and
use
up the stairs
she, her
to
pronouns.
the 2nd floor to Hale's location. 3 students, young, 8 and 9 years old, had their lives
they were all
cut
9.
short.
They weren't 8 and 9. They were all
Evelyn
9. But
Dickhouse,
yeah.
her 3rd grade classmate, William Kinney, and Haley Shrugs. 3 staff members are also among the dead. Substitute teacher Cynthia Peak, head of school Catherine Kuntz, and the custodian Mike Hill, all beloved, all gone today. Kevin, this happened as breaking news during our hour yesterday.
Yeah, they haven't done. I think they're doing discussion
saw
here.
One side pitch to politics. We want to know the stories of those people we lost before we even talk about anything else.
It's a brutal situation. Well, that will continue. But this narrative is within our abilities as a technology, and we are not using it. It may sound Big Brother-like, it may encroach on privacy, but if you could save one child's life with this, what parent in America wouldn't vote for this? And this child went through that education using this, and where it infringes
Voted for what?
In this case that's never started before. Very often these individuals, clearly disturbed, put out information on social media days and hours before. We now have the technology to scour every server, to use it in our abilities.
They already do that, is the thing. They already track all the shit we say. They already have red flag laws in a lot of states that will ping your social medias and stuff like that if you say sussy shit. They just don't act on it. That's the problem.
Technology. And we are not using it. It may sound Big Brother-like it with this. What parent in America wouldn't vote for this? And this child went through that educational system in that school, put out that information on social. It could have been identified, and that person could have been apprehended, helped, whatever. But the most important thing is 2 AR-15s and a handgun. That's got to be out there on social somewhere. Audrey was clearly disturbed, but we, this is the narrative that's going to emerge on this case, and it'll start today.
My question is, why does anyone need 2 AR-15s? Is one not enough? I feel like once you've purchased one, you shouldn't be allowed to purchase another one unless you like turn in the first one you purchased, or can prove it was destroyed,
Not the only person.
I mean, I don't think anyone needs a singular AR-15, but especially not 2.
This way, we can stop this using technology.
Wow.
We can stop this using proper gun laws.
Kaylee.
You mentioned the victim's name.
One shotgun for hunting
Evelyn
and a
Dickhouse,
handgun.
her sister.
Shotguns are also, I believe it's been stated that shotguns are the best for home protection.
At a eulogy for these victims, said, "I don't want to be an only sibling." and it's heartbreaking. Hallie shrugged.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
But look, I want to just briefly speak
I'm so tired about talking about how heartbreaking it is that this keeps happening. Because yes, it does suck ass, but we haven't done anything to fix it. It's been like, what, 20 years since Columbine fucking happened? And we're still sitting around with our thumbs up our asses, crying about it every time kids get shot as if it's a new thing. Like, this isn't a new thing. This is something we should have been fixing over 20 years ago, but we haven't. So I'm tired of hearing, oh, thoughts and prayers. Oh, this is so sad. It's not even sad anymore. It's just life now. And that's the saddest part, is that how normal this is. And it's like, yeah, of course it sucks that kids are being murdered, but we've been able to stop that for a long time and haven't done anything about it. That's what makes me sad and upset, is that we've not done anything. We've not taken any fucking steps to make this not happen. Because it continues to happen. And increasingly more often happens.
Every mother in America right now. The Democrats want to talk about guns. Republicans bring up mental health. What can we as mothers do for our children? We can demand security at our schools. Go to your school board meeting. We see how powerful that is. We've seen parents in Virginia.
We shouldn't need security at our schools. That's the thing. We shouldn't need police officers at our schools. We shouldn't need metal detectors at our schools. Those are not things that we should need, yet it's things that we have. It's things my high school had. They added metal detectors right after I left, but we always had a couple officers at the building that were specifically assigned to the school. We shouldn't need those things. And the fact that that's what the solution that these people are offering is so fucking annoying, because there is a far more simple solution other than that does not involve spending billions of dollars putting security systems into schools and elementary schools and paying police officers to go stand around schools for the possibility that it might get shot up by some fucking psycho. You know, like, it's so fucking ridiculous. It's so fucking ridiculous. Also because the person who shot up the school went to this school, so they would know about and not that long ago. I mean, I guess they're 28, so it probably would have been a while, but you know what I mean? Like, they went to this school. They know the layout of the school. They probably were able to keep track of what the security and stuff was in the school, if there was any, where all the doors were, what doors are usually left open, things like that, because they went there. And so often the schools that are shot up by people who either go there or have kids who go there, or have kids who went there, or they went there. So they already are familiar with the school layout. So having all of this extra shit isn't helpful, because the kids who are going to do the shooting already know about the security measures and know how to bypass those security measures. But what kids can't bypass is buying a gun before the age of 18. Now, I know the shooter in this situation was 28, so that's a little different, but not all of them are that old. It's frustrating. It's just so frustrating. And it's even more frustrating because I can't fucking do anything about it.
Virginia, make change to curriculums.
Yes.
Demand an armed guard at your kids'
Make change to curriculums?
school. I walk by the Louis Vuitton store, there's an armed guard.
I would love to know why the school is such a popular target by all ages. School oftentimes is a very traumatic place for a lot of people. And also, schools are a place where you know people will always be located. So if you're looking for a lot of targets, a school is a good option, just like a church on a Sunday is a good option, because there are going to be people there. I would imagine that definitely contributes.
There's an armed guard for those diamonds. What diamond is more precious than our children?
Amen.
All of them, apparently, according to the lawmakers that have passed nothing in the past 20 fucking years to protect these kids.
No diamond. Demand that our children are protected. It's something that we can do today. We can do tomorrow. It is change, and it needs to happen in this country.
Well, and
and this is the same conversation we have every fucking time it happens, which is why I don't fucking care. It's why I don't bother watching news. I have to put it in quotes because this is Fox News coverage of this shit, because nothing is going to change. Nothing changed with Uvalde when 19 fucking children were murdered to such a horrific degree they had to use teeth to identify some of them. Nothing's going to change unless it continues to be only Christian schools that are getting shot up. If the shooters want to just target Christian schools, then maybe something will happen. You know what I mean? It's so frustrating.
It's one of those things that we don't have to
But yeah,
wait.
the spin that Fox News is going to put on it is, oh, we need more protection in our schools. Don't take our guns.
For people that we
Oh,
know.
it was a transgender who did it. Mental health, mental health. That's what they always say. It's always the same shit from these people. And it's true. The left is always like gun reform, but never fucking does anything to pass any fucking gun reform. And the right is always, ooh, mental health, but never does anything to pass any fucking mental health shit. It's so fucking frustrating. It's just the same song and dance every single time. Yeah, I don't know why Sweet Anita's recommended on here, but, you know, on this specific channel. Because I watch her on my regular YouTube channel, but... So out of place. Absolutely. She's very out of place amongst all these crazy fucking idiots. And then we've got Chica here for some fucking reason. Melanie Martinez belongs here, but, you know... Yeah, obviously Mark and stuff is going to be in here because it's Mark. And some of the stuff is still in here from past viewings, like, and stuff like that. And car crashes and, you know, things like that. You're not wrong. Angela Bassett did not get robbed at the Oscars. Stephanie Shu did. Maybe. I love when I clear a bunch of notifications and then as I'm sitting the phone back down, another notification pops up. What do we watch? I'm so tired, dude. I'm so tired. Fucking hell. I'm just tired in general. Not even like about anything in specific, like specifically. Ooh, Gothix is live. What's she talking about? The shooting, probably. Yeah. Good evening, Nico. Welcome in, rookie. Contract between God and man? Sure.
So many people look at the Ten Commandments as central to the whole of Exodus, but actually I think the covenant in chapter 19 is even more central. And
prepare to rot your brain with Bible nonsense.
Ten Commandments is the key part.
These conversations are worth fighting for? What are you talking about? No one is stopping these conversations, except for me every time I pause it, but no one is preventing people from talking about this shit. I don't know if that's... I assume that's what they're talking about. It's like, oh, these conversations are so important. We need to protect them, you know? And it's like the people who claim they're being canceled or being silenced, and then they go on like 40 different podcasts to talk about how they're being silenced and canceled, and it's like... You're on Fox News right now, like, you know? Yeah, I don't either. I don't know shit about the Bible, really. All the stuff I know about the Bible is mostly secondhand stuff, which is why I will often ask Max about things, because Max grew up in this, but Max has said before that they're a bit out of practice.
So many people look at the Ten Commandments as central to the whole of Exodus, but actually I think the covenant in chapter 19 is even more central, and the Ten Commandments is the key part of it. Mm-hmm. But I say that because here we're in a country, this is the master narrative of freedom that has shaped this country. And many people don't understand the links.
What's with the portal backgrounds? Why are we got portals going on back here? What's this about?
So I was fascinated. Leon Cass, who's a friend of several of us, he points out, you know, the Greeks had monarchy, aristocracy, democracy. They sort of run through all three of those. So Pharaoh is monarchy, ultimate tyranny. But when Moses is the sole leader, he's a kind of good Pharaoh. And Jethro says to him, no, you can't do it all yourself. But Jethro, in effect, introduces an aristocracy.
Who the fuck is Jethro? I know Shield 3:16, yeah. Yeah, John 3:16 is the only one that I know by heart, pretty much, other than, like, the opening of Genesis, which is, like, life, boom, open.
Aristocracy. You choose these good
Who the fuck is Jethro, though?
men to be the judge. Now, the covenant is quite different. It will bring in the entire people. And you have a very different idea
And it's
here.
a contractual relationship.
It's a
which is very
contractual
interesting,
relationship, but it, unlike the Hittite covenants,
These people talk too slow. Hold on.
whole people, all that the Lord says we will do. That's the origin of the covenant.
I also know fuck all about
Right,
the
well,
Bible,
and
yeah.
that seems to tie into the notion that was relevant to, well, even people like John Stuart Mill, like founders of classical liberalism, in some sense, that the arrangements by which a free people might organize themselves politically and trade are dependent axiomatically on an underlying ethos, and that ethos is essentially covenantal. It's contractual, and that also ties into something else we discussed earlier, which was the idea that when God revealed himself as the spirit that judged the tyrant, and he told Moses to tell the Pharaoh to let his people go, he didn't say, let my people go. He said, let my people go so that they may worship me in the desert. And that's the idea of ordered freedom instead of freedom as chaos, which is just the desert. So, so.
God seems to need a people.
Oh, he's wearing his half and half suit, the half red, the half blue suit. I think we've looked at that on stream before. Is this Mr. Prager over here? I think this is Mr. Prager.
Right. Exodus is about the founding of a people. What do you need to make a people? In this story,
So is it all white
founding
dudes?
of a people.
Yeah, it sure
what do you
is.
need to?
It's all old white men.
Seems to need a
It's
people.
shocking.
Right.
It's Bill
Exodus
Gates.
is about the founding of a people. What do you need to make a people? In this story, they have a story. They were in bondage and they got let out. It's a heroic story, right? And then there's a covenant. I make you a promise, you make me a promise. And then the last thing is, what happens in this book is he gives them a bunch of things to do together to celebrate their new relationship with each other and with God. And that, so
he released them from prison and slavery. And in return for releasing them from prison and slavery, because prison and slavery is bad, he said, now you have to worship me forever because I did the basic nice thing and let you out of slavery. And here's all the list of things you have to do. Also, have fun in the desert now. Did I translate that correctly? That's what I got from that description.
the rituals are vital because they can be the people, my people, and then they can remain a treasure to him.
How do you view, Larry, the relationship between the idea of a covenant with God and the idea of a contractual relationship and the later political ideas of social contract theory that people like Hobbes developed, that what binds us is actually a voluntary contract between people? That's not exactly what we're saying. There's a voluntary contract between people, but it's people in relationship to a higher revealed order. It's not merely a social contract. And so,
in the American Revolution, first of all, those are two different things: contract with God and contract with one another, but they merge. And so when they're working out what they're going to do about the king and about the parliament, they're saying, we don't have a contract with him. And contract law, grandly understood.
Dude, this is so boring. Like, listening to old white men talk about the Bible as if it's, like, fucking, like, philosophy is, I don't know what it is. It's just, it's like the perfect shit to listen to fall asleep because it's so nonsensical. Because they're using all these words I don't understand, but then they also repeat themselves a lot, and restate things a lot. Like they'll say the same thing over and over and over again, but in different ways. So it makes it sound like they're saying a lot of different smart things when they're actually just saying one thing over and over again. And it just gets so monotonous, which is why I've sped it up to 1.25.
Governs God's governance of the universe. It's wrong.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Grandly with him. And contract law, grandly understood, governs God's governance of the universe. It
governs God's governance of the universe. Governs God's governance of the universe. I'm sorry, that is just the dumbest sentence. I don't know why. It just feels stupid to me.
For him to do that.
I'm sure Max would be a much more interesting person to watch this, because Max would probably understand what's going on better. But Max is at work making money, and I'm sitting here not making money. Is God a governor all of a sudden? Apparently. I mean, he's been promoted, it seems. Also, welcome in, athlete. It's been a while.
Because see, God has chosen to make his people free, right? And that means they have to be a party to the transaction.
God chose to make his people free. So for a while, he chose to not let them be free, is what I'm hearing. Now, I'm sure people would just say I'm being mean-spirited, but like the fact that he had to choose to make his people free means they weren't already free or weren't free by default. It was a choice that God made to be like, nah, we shouldn't put my people in slavery, which is a weird choice to have to make. But I mean, yeah. Imagine electing Thor as governor. I mean, which Thor are we talking about? Are we talking about Thor from the MCU? Because I would like the fuck out of that guy. Or are we talking about Thor from God of War? Because that guy sounds like a fucking cunt.
Right. So that idea of
which
the merging,
version of Thor?
Just one second. The idea of the merging is extremely interesting, because maybe it's something like this. So you imagine that there's this attempt to cobble together a vision of the fundamental uniting transcendent spirit, and that's a pattern. And that pattern manifests itself.
Okay. Whenever this Kermit motherfucker opens his mouth, I need you to look at how many big words he attempts to string together to try to sound smart, because he's not saying anything intellectual. He's just trying to sound intellectual. Frog Thor, the variant? Yes.
Maybe it's something like this. So you imagine that there's this attempt to cobble together a vision of the fundamental uniting transcendent spirit, and that's a pattern.
Fundamental uniting transcendent spirit. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? But this isn't just what he sounds like when he talks about God. This is what he sounds like when he talks about anything, which is why arguing with this man is so frustrating, because he will say things in such a way that it doesn't matter how you respond. He can take it in a way and like falsify what you're saying, basically, by turning what you said on its head, using the fact that he talked in a way that was so unintellectual and so stupid that he can sort of rework. It's really smart, but it's also really frustrating, because he's wrong a lot of the times when he talks about stuff like this. Not God necessarily, but like when he talks about a lot of things, he's incorrect. Which, I mean, we all are, but he acts like he's right all of the time, and will speak as if he knows everything. And he'll say shit like fundamental uniting transcendent spirit, and then when someone turns around and asks him what that means, he'll turn that back on you and be like, what do you mean you don't know what that means? You know, he'll do shit like that, and it's really annoying to watch him, which is why we watch him here.
And that pattern manifests itself in multiple ways. But there's, if it's a merging of the idea of the contract between people and the contract between the ultimate, then what you have is this dawning idea that the fundamental central nature of a contract between people has to reflect a transcendent order for it to be a priori valid. And we'd say...
I feel like I'm listening to like, I really do feel like I'm in a philosophy class, because I didn't understand a word of what he just said. Granted, I am not an intellectual. I am not a very intelligent person. I'm not intellectual in any capacity. So, like... Let's try that again. Hold on.
And that pattern manifests itself of the fundamental uniting transcendent spirit, and that's a pattern. And that pattern manifests itself in multiple ways. But there's, if it's a merging of the idea of the contract between people and the contract between the ultimate, then what you have is this dawning idea that the fundamental central nature of a contract between people has to reflect a transcendent order for it to be a priori valid.
Okay, so what he just said, from what I heard, What's the same thing twice in a row, back to back, to explain itself? Right?
And that's a pattern.
Because they're talking about the contract between men and the contract between men and God, like the contract between men and men versus the contract between men and God are merging, right? Right. That's what the other guy said, and that's what he's building off of.
The pattern manifests itself in multiple ways.
And the pattern is the way the merging happens, right?
If it's a merging
of the idea, a merging of the contracts, right?
Between the ultimate, then what you have
then
is
what
this
you have
idea that the fundamental central nature.
Then what you have is the nature of a contract being the same as the contract between man and God. He just repeated himself in a different way to explain what he said in the first part of the sentence. That's what just happened. Are we on the same page? I feel like that's
of a contract between people has to reflect a transcendent order for it to be eighth priority valid. And
I don't know what eighth priority valid means. I don't know if that's what he's actually saying, but I do believe he just said the same thing twice. He said, like, the sky is blue because blue is the sky, basically. You know, like, that's basically what just happened about merging contracts and the contract between men and men versus the contract between men and God being essentially the same, but not the same. They're very similar to one another, because the contract that men make between each other mirrors the contract that men make with God, basically, is what he's saying. But he just said it by explaining it again. Which is why I hate Jordan Peterson so much, because he does this with everything. It's so fucking annoying. Like, trying to break down his sentences takes like 4 years for like 2 sentences. It's annoying.
We'd say, I think the way we would respond to that instinctually would be, imagine you got the better of me in a contractual deal. Well, the idea that you got the better of me is an indication that the deal itself has violated some implicit order, and it's in some sense unfair. You've got one over me, right? If it was merely a social contract, then, well, whatever we agreed on would go. And it can't be. It has to be a social contract that reflects some sort of...
He's using so many big words. Does he know what they mean? I think he does, which is what makes him so effective in these sorts of like arguments and stuff.
Higher order, implicit order, and I think those are the same thing.
But the contract is necessary too, because
I'm sorry, his suit is so stupid.
God made his people free, and so if I make you do it, because
the same thing.
But the contract is necessary too, because God made his people free.
The contract is necessary because God made his people free. Okay.
And so, if I make you do it for your benefit by force, you're not a party. Mm-hmm. And God is apparently very interested in our being a party to the contract.
But he's not, though. Because God forces us to do shit all the time.
And so, if I make you do it for your benefit by force...
If I make you do it for your benefit by force, which is what God does all the time, right? That's literally, like, constantly what he does. Like, this is a dumb example, but just within what they're talking about right now, he releases people from slavery, right? By force. He released them from slavery by force. Hypothetically, let's say one of those people didn't want to not be a slave anymore, which is a stupid hypothetical, but it's the only one I got because it's relevant to the situation. He would be forcing them to be free against their choice. You know what I mean? So what he's describing is not even accurate, because God does that in loads of other situations as well, not just the freeing his people from slavery or whatever. Contract is necessary because God made us free. Then why is there a contract in the first place? Exactly.
Of course, you're not a party.
It's like God punishing Eve for eating the apple when he's supposed to be a forgiving God. Like, why wouldn't he just forgive her? And why did he punish for everyone forever? You know? Did he say priority or priority? I am not sure.
Mm-hmm. And God is apparently very interested in our being a party to the contract.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important too to keep in, not to over. I mean, that we have to keep in mind somehow the absolute character of the divine, of God Himself, the ultimate principles. They're not conditional.
I put both into ChatGPT and had no clue what it meant.
They're not conditional on what we do. And with, on the other hand, the
This is in 1.25 speed, by the way.
the conditional character of our own engagement with that, which can happen or not happen. In some sense, it's like you can have a fire burning very, very hot, but you can be closer or further to that fire. The fire is burning hot, whether you are close to it or far from it. But you can choose to move away from, you might say, the unconditional nature of that burning, of that, you can say, the fire of God's burning love. And of course, we're going to see here, just in later here, the very image of purification in the fire and in the need to abstain from sex and to wash your clothes and all these kind of preparatory, purificatory
Daniel Prager.
rights. But I think we need to be careful not,
Yeah, God's burning love.
in any event, to make it seem as if God's activity is conditional on ours. That he chooses us, and that our choosing is within that choosing of us.
But his choosing is conditional. Because they're talking about God. You can't be specific when you're talking about God because the Bible's not fucking specific. Except for when it talks about killing your wife because XYZ. Why did I pause it?
Not, in any event, to make it seem as if God's activity is conditional on ours.
But God's activity is conditional on ours. His love is conditional in every way, shape, and form. If you don't love me, I won't love you. That is a condition. Whether it be a valid condition or not, it's a condition nonetheless. But, you know what I mean? Like God won't save you if you don't repent. You know what I mean? So he's breaking his contract, essentially. You know what I mean? I feel like my Catholic friend could destroy these guys in a debate about God. You know?
That he chooses us, and that our choosing is within that choosing of us. And because of the weight of our will, to what extent we can engage with and
They're all trying to sound very intellectual, which is so funny. And it's also part of the reason why I think they keep stuttering a lot. All of them keep stuttering a lot and repeating themselves a lot. Because they're trying to sound smart and trying to phrase things in a way where they sound smart. And I just find that amusing.
be realized ourselves in God's activity does in a fundamental way depend on what we do.
So there's still a voluntary
100%,
subjugation to that,
yes.
but the ethos isn't a consequence. It's not an emergent consequence of the contract between man and God.
No.
So.
But Jordan, there's a...
You see what he just did there?
To what extent we can engage with and be realized ourselves in God's activity does in a fundamental way depend on what we do.
So there's still a voluntary subjugation
There's still a voluntary...
to that,
yes.
but
Still a voluntary substitution to that.
the ethos isn't a consequence.
The ethos isn't a
It's not an emergent
consequence.
consequence.
It's not
of the
emergent
contract
consequence
between man
of
and
the
God.
contract. Stop trying to sound smart. Just say things like you're dumb. It makes everything so much easier.
No.
But Jordan, there's a contrast here with the Greeks and the Romans. In other words, monarchy, aristocracy, democracy
we're
is
back
all
to
about
this.
government. This is not. This is about forming a people. And the alternatives are, on the one hand, organic societies linked with blood, kinship, or hierarchical linked by power. And this is...
And we know that Mr. Peterson loves him some hierarchies.
It's unique. Now you have the Hittite treaties and so on, but they were very narrow. And I wouldn't use the word contract so much as you're doing. Covenant adds to law a moral dimension. It's a morally...
But a covenant is just a contract, isn't it? Right? Yeah. Oh, that's the name of the school that just got shot up. I was like, why did it pull up news stuff? Because it's the name of the school that just got shot up. Yeah, a covenant is an agreement, so a contract. It's just another word. It just means the same thing. You don't need to use the word covenant instead of contract. They are the same word. Yeah, the biblical meaning of a covenant is a binding agreement. A legal contract. From firmisrael.org.
binding pledge. The Lord gives his promise, and they do.
So
Now
is the covenant what the founders referred to as what was self-evident?
No, that's the truths behind it. No, it's we the people. That's the covenantal part.
Okay.
But of course, the American Constitution is a covenant with the citizenry under God, whereas the Jewish covenant is a covenant with God. And that is unique. I mean, the Hittite covenants, you can cite God, but he's a partner in this one. He himself is making a pledge.
And so do you also see that as counterpoised to the, let's say, the Greek idea that...
Counterpoised? I want to shoot this man so bad.
Absolutely.
Men are just the playthings of the gods, right? They're just...
Take a shot every time he says some big word for no goddamn reason.
Just arbitrary forces operating in the background.
Arbitrary.
Who have no interest in a relationship in some sense.
Well, the Greek suspicion of democracy is certainly Plato and Aristotle.
Are you comparing American society to Jewish religion? Apparently.
Aristotle's suspicion of democracy was that it was mob rule. It descended into mob rule because there...
Not Marlboro. Not Marlboro. I think you said mob rule.
Who have no interest in a relationship in some sense.
Well, the Greek suspicion of democracy is certainly Plato and Aristotle's suspicion of democracy was that it was mob rule. It descended into mob rule because there wasn't that verticality of the government. That is to say, the idea that you have this flat egalitarian plane and that prizes freedom too much, raw freedom, that is not constrained or ordered towards any kind of transcendent.
So it's too much desert.
But you've got to say, there's a problem with this too. In other words, you have an ideal, each one, and then a corrupted form. And there's a very simple problem. The Lord keeps his promise, and humans don't.
Well, the Jews
not very long.
There he is. I was wondering when he was going to talk.
Well, actually, it's very interesting that you raise this, because the Jewish mentality is that...
He is a Jew, so it makes sense that he'd speak up here. Yep.
That he is obliged as well. And there's an extremely famous story of rabbis, Orthodox Jews at Auschwitz, the largest of the death camps of the Nazis, put God on trial for breaking the covenant. Elie Wiesel affirmed that this actually took place. This is not apocryphal. And here is the amazing thing. They gave God a lawyer. They gave God a prosecutor. And the prosecutor won. These religious Jews found God guilty of breaking the covenant. But here's the punchline for Jews anyway. And after they said, and God is found guilty, they said, and now it is time to daven mincha. It is now time for the afternoon prayer. He broke the covenant, but we're having the afternoon prayer.
But in the scriptures, the stress is...
Okay. So he broke their agreement, and then they decided to go back to him anyways? So we're describing, say it with me now, an abusive relationship.
on the renewal of the covenant with the people, isn't it?
No, clearly,
it breaks
yes. But I'm only talking, since you raised it, of the Jewish mentality is what you said. There is a relationship between covenant and contract. In fact,
yeah, the relationship is the same word.
Man has a contract with a woman when they marry. It's called the ketubah, and it means contract. The concept of contract is very deep in the biblical and later Jewish mind.
And do you think that is the essential ethos of a contract is that it's a binding agreement as long as both parties abide by the spirit of the contract?
But that is amazing. They found God guilty.
Yes, that's how a contract works. I'm sorry, I need that sentence again.
Covenant and contract. In fact, a man has a contract with a woman when they marry. It's called the ketubah, and it means contract. The concept of contract is very deep in the biblical and later Jewish mind.
And do you think that is the essential ethos of a contract is
the essential ethos of a contract?
It's a binding agreement as long
is that it's a binding agreement. Yes, that's what a contract is. Why are you trying to say that's what a contract is? That's what it means. A contract is a binding agreement. There is no essential ethos. That's just what the word means.
as long as both parties abide by the spirit of the contract?
That is.
I hate this man so much. He did. He just defined contract. I hate this man.
It's amazing. They found God guilty and then did the prayers. So you are guilty, but we're keeping our side.
See, it's possible. I mean, first of all, Auschwitz was hard to imagine a worse thing.
I'm sorry. He just said Auschwitz, and it said ask for twists, because he said Auschwitz so fucking weirdly.
It's possible. I mean, first of all, Auschwitz was hard to imagine a worse thing. But they were probably imagining were all going to be killed. Every Jew. That was Hitler's aim. Hitler actually thought God said he would not let the people be destroyed after Noah. I'm going to kill them all and then look up and say, how about that, God? And so from the point of view of the way the world looked to them in Auschwitz was, he's going to kill all of us, but we were promised not. And if he'd succeeded in that, that would have been a breach of the covenant.
Well, one of the things that always struck me as so interesting about the Old Testament...
Yeah, because God's the one who stopped Hitler's reign of terror, right? That was God who did that, absolutely. It wasn't Hitler himself by killing himself after the Allied powers forced him into a corner. Yeah, it was definitely God who did it. Right.
Accounts of the Jewish attitude towards God was that the Jews always assumed axiomatically that no matter what happened...
What the fuck does that mean? What does that mean? In a way that is obviously true and therefore does not need to be proved. What is another word for axiomatically? Certainly, acceptedly, self-evidently, undeniably. Just use basic words. What the fuck is axiomatically? God used the people to stop Hitler. I mean, yeah, that's what they always say.
In some sense, interesting about the Old Testament accounts of the Jewish attitude towards God was that the Jews always assumed axiomatically that no matter what happened...
They always assumed undeniably...
In some sense, both personally and socially...
What? What about those suits? His suit's ugly. I hate it. It's gross. It's stupid. He looks dumb. And not just because he's Jordan Peterson.
They were at fault and took responsibility for it. And it was like the axiomatic assumption of God's goodness. And it's sort of like it's a statement of faith, right? It's the axiomatic assumption of
Stop saying axiomatic.
God's goodness, all evidence to the contrary in some real sense. And I've been trying to puzzle that out because I do believe...
No, he just bought the suit because he thinks it looks cool. That's the thing. He thinks he looks cool. He's not wearing it as a statement. He thinks it looks cool. Because he's dumb.
Believe that it's morally incumbent upon us to do good, regardless, let's say, of the degree.
Can I get a transcript? Okay. The goodness... Okay. The Old Testament accounts of the Jewish attitude towards God was that Jews always assumed axiomatically, meaning undeniably, they assumed undeniably that no matter what happened in some sense, both personally and socially, they were at fault and took responsibility for it. So that means that regardless of the fact that God broke the contract, the Jews felt they were responsible? Is that what that means? Yeah, but not the tie. The tie doesn't match. It's very bizarre. I think Peterson is really superfluous person. He's good at naming obvious things, which is perhaps quite a lot these days. Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to dissect the last 3 sentences he just said because I didn't understand a word of it because the way he talks. Okay, so yes, more gaslighting. The Jews assumed that regardless of the fact that they proved, allegedly, that God broke his contract, it was still their fault. And so it was the undeniable assumption of God's goodness, despite the fact that, the Holocaust was happening. And it's sort of like the act, it's statement of faith. Their act of taking the blame is a statement of faith. It's the undeniable assumption of God's goodness, all evidence to the contrary in some real sense. Yeah, no, that doesn't make any fucking sense. That doesn't make any fucking sense. I'm sorry, that doesn't make any fucking sense. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. I'm like even reading it. I'm not just listening to him talk. I'm reading it in the transcript over here, and it doesn't make any fucking sense. Indeed, clowning. I've been trying to puzzle that out because I do believe that it's morally incumbent upon us to do good regardless of the degree to which we're persecuted or insulted or tortured or hurt. Because he also throws shit in here, like, let's say, because it makes him sound smart. Is that none of that matters, no matter how intense it becomes, no matter how justified no matter how justified. End of sentence. But he probably doesn't pause, does he?
Comes. No matter how justified, you know, I've talked to people.
Yeah, no, he just stops in the middle. Yeah, translation would be good to your abuser.
Practice in my private life who were terribly tortured when they were children, for example. They have brutal histories, and you'd think, man, if that person did something evil, you'd think, well, how could you avoid it? And yet I've seen people come out of that who've refused to do evil despite all that. And then you're sort of starstruck with amazement at their moral fortitude. But part of it is the decision. I don't know how it's linked exactly, but it's the decision to hold axiomatically the proposition that being itself is good, and you're morally obliged to participate in that goodness regardless of the circumstances, both sociological and psychological.
And that's such a good moment.
He's trying so hard to sound smart. It hurts my brain. I think the reason it hurts my brain is because he's trying to sound smart. Not because he is smart. Not because he is saying smart things, but because he is trying his hardest to sound smart. You know what I mean? And it hurts my brain. Because I can tell that he's actively trying. Yes, to fit as many 10-letter words into a sentence that he can. Because he thinks it makes him sound smart. And a lot of times doing that will confuse people because they're like I am right now. They're like, what are you talking about? What are you saying? I don't understand what you're saying. He could be talking about the most simple fucking thing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? I have so many things I want to say. It's against us. Don't break TOS, Ricky.
For us to perhaps transition into 20 because it's precise. I would argue, you said this so beautifully here now, it's precisely the making of the covenant that, you might say, in some sense, allows for them to receive the revelation of the law.
In some sense, you know, shit like that. Oh, that was exhausting. We're done. Thank God. We're done with that. Oh my God. That was exhausting. That was so exhausting. Jordan Peterson is exhausting as a person. Ugh. Yeah, I saved this one. This one should be fun to watch. And try to blame ADHD on something else that's not a hormonal imbalance. Do that one. Yeah, I think I saved it in the watch later. Rotting our brains with Jordan B. Peterson.
ADHD. I'm 16 in high school, and it seems that more and more students are being put on meds to fix their lack of. What are your thoughts on?
For the record, I have diagnosed ADHD and have since elementary school.
ADHD.
This guy talking, and all I'm hearing is divorce.
I'm 16 in high school, and it seems that more and more students are being put on meds to fix their lack of discipline.
Yeah, I think it's just like psychiatric, except in extraordinarily rare cases.
Hold on, I need to turn on the transcripts. Okay.
There are people who are neurologically damaged, who have physiological reasons for difficulty.
Nope, it's too slow. Sorry, I was going to try to... Nope, can't do it.
In maintaining optimized attentional focus. You see that in people, for example, who have fetal alcohol syndrome. Most of the
See, his attempt at being intellectual. Optimize attentional focus. Maintaining optimized attentional focus. You could just say maintaining focus. That you don't need to say optimized attentional focus. Focus is attentional. That's how focus works. I'm literally getting a headache from this.
Time, as far as I'm concerned, it's a rubbish diagnosis. Panksepp, the same neuroscientist.
Sorry, fetal alcohol syndrome is a rubbish diagnosis? What are you a doctor in again? Oh, you're a psychologist, so you're not a doctor then. You're not a medical doctor, so shut the fuck up then. Because fetal alcohol syndrome is not a syndrome, is, to my knowledge, not a like a psychological issue. It's a like an actual like malformation of the brain, right? Central nervous system problems, minor facial features, and growth problems. They can have problems with learning, memory, attention span, communication, vision, or hearing. Yeah, due to... Because it's a birth defect. It's like a brain fuckery. Like, it malforms your brain. Yeah, because drinking alcohol while you were pregnant causes birth defects and causes learning disabilities. Because the alcohol affects the development of the growing fetus. That's what fetal alcohol syndrome is. It is not a mental illness. It is like an illness caused by physical deformations, essentially, for lack of a better term. Yeah. Is a condition in a child that results from alcohol exposure during a mother's pregnancy. And that's why they don't want kids to drink alcohol, because it will do the same thing while you're developing. Yeah, just like smoking. This isn't like ADHD, which is caused by hormonal imbalance, which a psychologist could, in theory, speak on with full knowledge. He does have a degree in psychology. An ancient degree in psychology. He's not been in school since the 90s. Yeah. So he's a little outdated in his education, although they're supposed to, like teachers, continue to learn and read up on their specific, like if they've got a, like, if you're a psychologist and you're working as a therapist who specializes in, like, people with PTSD, for example, you will continue to read up on studies about people with PTSD and things like that, and other treatments and things like that. You'll continue to learn the same way teachers have to continue to learn all the time so they can continue to teach the kids correctly. Psychologists tend to have to do that for whatever their specification is if they have one. Woo. Yeah, and his last education is listed in 91. That's a long ass time ago. Dear God. I'm sure this shit would rot Max's brain. Which is the craziest part, because Max actually is intellectual, unlike myself, and understands all of the big words. Dying of my own spit. Okay.
That I talked to you about, who investigated it's a rubbish diagnosis. Panksepp, the same neuroscientist that I talked to you about, who investigated play behavior in rats, also noted, this is quite fun, that if you deprive juvenile male rats of the opportunity to play boisterously, they become hyperactive. And also, if
oh
you
yes,
deprive
because rats are the same as us. Absolutely, 100%.
them of the opportunity to play optimally, their prefrontal cortices do not mature well. Mm-hmm. And the prefrontal cortex matures late, and it constitutes, in some sense, that...
I mean, yeah, I could believe that this would be true for kids as well, but it doesn't just occur in boys. It occurs in girls as well, and also differently, I would assume, than it does in rats. And also, I know a lot of people with diagnosed ADHD who played outside a lot as kids and who weren't understimulated and things like that, so this isn't even a valid argument as to a potential reason or cause for ADHD. Maybe you could argue for it as a cause in some people, but yeah.
The pinnacle of neurological development, and it needs to develop in the course of intense play. And then he noticed that if you administered hyperactive play-deprived rats amphetamine, Ritalin, that it would inhibit their frenetic playing. And that's pretty much what's happening in schools.
Not true. That's not true. That's not true. Because Ritalin is dopamine. Ritalin is a dopamine-based drug. Let me double check that it's not the other one. Ritalin is... It's dopamine, not serotonin, right? Yes. I'm making sure I'm not lying to you because, unlike this man, I don't know everything. So, yes, Ritalin works by increasing the amount of dopamine released in the striatum, a key region in the brain related to motivation, action, and cognition. So it specifically puts dopamine to a specific region of the brain. Dopamine. That is what a lot of people with ADHD lack. I took Adderall. I'm sure I took Ritalin at one point because I took a bunch of different ones as a kid. But I took Adderall the most. I took it from 6th grade to 2 years ago. Adderall does dopamine and norepinephrine. I can't speak today. Norepinephrine, as well as dopamine. It doesn't just produce dopamine in your brain. It does norepinephrine as well. So it does more than one thing, which is why Adderall works for some people and Ritalin works for others. Some don't work for anybody. But at the end of the day, they are made to do the same thing, which is increase feelings of motivation and encourage people to like take action and do things, because a lot of the big issues with ADHD, like one of the main things that you will find amongst most people with ADHD is not a hyperactivity, but not necessarily in the way he's describing. He's describing adolescent ADHD, which often, especially in boys, often presents itself as physical hyperactivity. But what you will actually see more often in both boys and girls is more of a mental hyperactivity where you're thinking too much. Your brain is almost essentially like overstimulated, and to a degree that where it sort of essentially prevents you from getting stuff done. So like, you have stuff you need to do, you have stuff you might want to do, but for whatever reason, you can't get your brain to actually like flip the switch that says, let's go do that thing. And so instead your brain will do something else, or you will sit there and do nothing. I've been struggling with that a lot lately at night when I'm by myself and I've got a bunch of free time and I've got all this big long list of shit that I want to watch, but I can't decide which one of them I want to watch. So I just end up scrolling through TikTok for countless hours. I've stopped taking Adderall because it stopped working for me a long time ago. But I stopped taking it at the end of school. So I didn't have to deal with withdrawals and stuff during schooling, but it had stopped working for me years before that. I don't really have an interest in taking more medication again because it's not affecting my ability to function and do like things like going to work or doing my taxes or things like that. It only affects me to a degree that's annoying during like times where I'm not doing anything productive anyways. So because I've lived with ADHD for so long, I've found a way to mitigate it without medication to a degree that would be helpful. If I was working in a field like the one Max works in, however, I would absolutely still need medication because Max works in a very smart field where your attention is absolutely required and understanding is absolutely required. And I very much struggle with that just as a person on top of the ADHD. Whereas my job is fully physical and does not really require a lot of thought whatsoever. So it's perfect for a person like myself who is bad at doing thinking things. But Max takes Ritalin, and it helps with their depression because it produces dopamine, and people with depression don't produce enough dopamine. So I don't know why he's saying hyperactivity when most people with ADHD don't have the type of hyperactivity he's describing. Especially because he's talking about hyperactive play, meaning physical hyperactivity. And most of the time, most people with ADHD who you see who have physical hyperactivity are kids. You know what I mean? Like it's kids, you will see that hyperactive. I was very hyperactive as a child physically. Like did a lot of sports. I talked a lot. I mean, I still talk a lot, but not to the degree I did as a child. I was super like energetic all of the time, and now I can't fucking get up off the couch half the time. But and so he's talking about hyperactivity physically. I don't know if he'll go into how hyperactivity manifests in a more mental capacity, because that's what you see far more often in general, both in adults, but also in young girls as well. It doesn't always manifest itself as physical hyperactivity in young girls. It will usually manifest as mental hyperactivity in young girls before it will in boys. A lot of people who have ADHD diagnosed as a kid will grow out of that physical hyperactivity as they get older, but not necessarily grow out of ADHD itself. I do know that it's not uncommon for people to grow out of ADHD necessarily, like to be diagnosed with it as a kid and then go in and get tested again as an adult and not be diagnosed with it, like have their diagnosis sort of scratched out. I know that's not uncommon. I'm not going to say it's common, but I know it's not like super rare for that to happen. So, you know, that's something to look at, I guess. You're not aware of the Giga certification? I wonder if Max is done with work. Max said they were going to be done at 5. Max.
Amphetamine, Ritalin, that it would inhibit their frenetic playing. And that's pretty much what's happening in schools.
And not playing.
So the schools are not well adapted to boys. I don't think they're particularly well adapted to girls either, by the way. But
schools aren't well adapted in general. Schools are not well adapted to kids with, or people in general with mental disorders or mental disabilities or learning disabilities. They are not designed for people like that. They are designed for the neurotypical child, and it's barely even designed for them, if we're being completely honest, because the schooling system originated because they needed to teach kids how to do work. And so that's the way it started was we teach every kid the same thing so they can all work and make money. That was essentially the origin of schooling, and it's not really progressed far enough to really, with the exception of like special ed courses for like kids who are, you know, very intellectually challenged, and like to a degree that it's like not just fetal alcohol syndrome, but it's like very, very severe, like super severe autism or something like that, you know, for an example, with the exception of special ed classes that kids like myself weren't qualified enough to get into. They're not adapted for kids. That's why they throw medication at children. It's because, oh, you're too hyper, here, take this. You know, like, oh, you can't focus, here, try this. Oh, that's not working, try this. Oh, that makes you want to die, try this. So that's what they end up doing because they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Particularly not well adapted to boys. Boys aren't designed to sit still and be bored out of their skulls for 7 hours a day.
I mean, no one's designed for that. Not just boys, but no one is designed for that.
And there are boys with particular temperaments who are even less inclined to be able to do that. So, for example, if you're extroverted, highly social, possessed by a fair bit of enthusiasm and positive emotion, then you're going to appear more hyperactive. If you're creative, then your attention is going to be fragmented in some...
I mean, it's not uncommon for people with ADHD to be creative. Like, that's a very common situation. That's why you see so many of the big YouTubers that are out there who either have been diagnosed with ADHD in the past or recently discovered that they have ADHD. It's very, very common for people in creative fields to have ADHD. So he's not wrong in saying this, but he's talking about it as if it's only boys. And I think it's interesting that that's such a common thread amongst so many creatives like out there, not just in the YouTube space, of course, but in things like film and art and even IT, which requires a degree of creativity as well, of course, because you're writing in a different language, basically, because coding is a language. And it's very common to find people who are creatives and then they also have ADHD. That is super common. And I don't know if it's like officially recognized by any sort of like medical professionals, but it's definitely a correlation that has been noted by a lot of people. My coding skills suck a mood. I would suck at it so bad because I suck at languages, and you have to learn a language, basically. Coding is a language, and I'm terrible at languages, as we've discussed in the
by
past.
the multiplicity of your interests. So if you're creative and extroverted, then you have both of those working against you in terms of your quiescent adaptation to the school environment. If you're
Stop making me Google words. Quiescent. In a state or period of inactivity or dormancy. In terms of your quiescent adaptation to the school environment. So he didn't use that word correctly. He didn't use that word correctly. Let's replace it with one of the synonyms, which is inactive. Huh? You in terms of your inactive adaptation to the school environment. Yeah, that's not how you use that word, Mr. Intellectual. I'm curious if Max knows what this word means. Hey, Max. Are you done with work? Because Max is an intellectual who knows a lot of big words for no real reason. So I'm curious to know if Max knows what quiescent means. Because he doesn't know what it means. He didn't use it correctly. At least from my limited knowledge. Maybe Max will prove me wrong, but, you know. Oh, God.
In terms of your quiescent adaptation to the school environment, if you're disagreeable, which is also more likely if you're male, then you're...
That's not true. I don't... Where is he getting that from? Have we done a study on disagreeability between the sexes? I don't think so. And I don't think if you... Stereotypically, I think women tend to be stereotypically more disagreeable. Like, if you think about, like, all the, like, stereotypes that are out there, who is it that's usually more disagreeable? Who is it that will be like, oh, no, I don't want that, I want this? That's usually a thing that's applied to women, so I don't know where he's even getting this, because not even the stereotype agrees with him on this. So, in terms of DevOps, I have to learn YAML files, which is vary between every type of software, playbooks, Terraform, CI/CD pipeline. That's so much stuff. Oh yeah, I know what AWS is. I know what that means.
Quite likely to push back against what you see as stupid, arbitrary rules. And so we know perfectly well, for example, that attention deficit disorder overlaps with childhood conduct disorder and antisocial behavior.
So he's talking about ADD. ADD and ADHD are not the same thing.
And I'm not saying that
ADD is a form of ADHD.
Children diagnosed with hyperactivity are conduct disordered. I'm saying that more aggressive boys tend to manifest symptoms that sometimes tilt them towards juvenile criminality and sometimes tilt them towards attention.
That's true. People with ADHD are more likely to be juvenilely criminal. That is the thing. That is, I do believe I've heard that at some point in my life, that if you have ADHD and are put in the right situation, you're more likely to lean into criminality as a juvenile specifically. I believe I read that somewhere at some point. I could be remembering incorrectly, but I'm pretty sure he's actually correct about that. So I got to give him a point there.
Deficit disorder and hyperactivity. But it's partly their somewhat rebellious temperament. And so if you're disagreeable and extroverted and creative, then why wouldn't you be hyperactive? And then you might say, so when amphetamines were first used to treat hyperactivity,
it does work for treating hyperactivity, but okay.
The hypothesis was the following.
Let's give the children meth. That was the hypothesis.
Hyperactive or attention deficit disordered are of a different neurological type. Now, as I said, in rare circumstances, that's true. But absent evidence for neurological dysfunction, I would hesitate to make that presumption.
I mean, he's not wrong in that ADHD is overly diagnosed, especially in young boys. That is very, very well known statistically that young boys are diagnosed with ADHD at a rate that is way too high and not accurate, which is why so many of them grow out of it, because a lot of them never had it, but were diagnosed with it because they were hyperactive. So he's not necessarily wrong in that. It's one of the reasons why women and young girls are underdiagnosed in ADHD, because it presents differently in women than it does in men. So that is one of the reasons why you see so many more men and young boys diagnosed with ADHD versus girls and women. is because of the way it presents. It presents as more internal in women and more external in men. So any and all hyperactive boys will be diagnosed with ADHD. Meanwhile, the girls who are sitting there depressed and sad, who might be diagnosed with depression, actually have ADHD. This is a very well-known issue in the medical community and in the ADHD community, which is why so many of us like TikTok, not just because it satisfies our short-term, like, what's it called? There's actually a video down here about it. Short-term instant gratification. It satisfies that, like, short-term dopamine burst, but also because so many of us are on there talking about new things we've learned about ourselves that are actually because of our ADHD or a symptom of our ADHD. And so many people are being shown those TikToks and being like, I do all these things. Like, especially women. They're like, I do all that stuff. Maybe I have ADHD. And then they go get tested and they do. So I don't know if he's even really making that point, but it sounds like he kind of is making the point that a lot of young boys are diagnosed with ADHD despite the fact that they aren't, that they don't have it. Sorry, so which he would not be incorrect about. He's absolutely correct about that. But I mean, it doesn't take a scientist to know that.
The run-of-the-mill hyperactive boy, if you put him on amphetamines, Ritalin, his attentional focus improves. Now, the original hypothesis was that's because these abnormally neurologically structured hyperactive boys have a paradoxical reaction to amphetamine administration. It calms them down, whereas with normal people, they become more stimulated, okay?
Which is true. That's how Adderall works, specifically Adderall. I don't know about Ritalin, but that's how Adderall works.
There's a word for that theory, and the word is wrong. Okay, so more intelligent and differentiated analysis has indicated that if you give any child amphetamines...
The reason for that is amphetamines provide dopamine. If you've got a low amount of dopamine, it will bring you up to normal, which will make you less hyperactive, more focused. For people who already have the correct amount of dopamine, they now have too much dopamine, which causes additional problems. It's literally basic science. Yeah, having too much dopamine, concentrated in some parts of the brain and not in other parts, is linked to being more competitive, aggressive, and having poor impulse control, which can lead to things like ADHD, which is why you take amphetamine, because it puts dopamine into a different part of the brain to level things out. Now, someone without taking Adderall without ADHD, is more likely to give you side effects because you already have the correct amount of dopamine in that portion of your brain, which then can cause other issues, which is why they don't all work on everybody, and which is why it is very addictive to people who don't have ADHD. People with ADHD very rarely get addicted to Adderall. People who don't have ADHD very commonly get addicted to Adderall because it gives them a sort of a high. It gives them this like magical ability to control themselves to a degree beyond what they already can, which they very much like, and then they will continue to abuse that substance. It's very, very, very rare that you hear of someone with ADHD being addicted to Adderall. So, you know, I have a fellow IT guy here, more reason to visit your chat and not AFK. He's been here the whole time, rookie. What do you mean? This isn't a new development. He's always been here. What do you mean? Max, when you're done with work, can you come here? Thank you. Yes, 18 months. Thank you, Jimmy, for the subscription. I appreciate you.
What's up?
Do you know what the word, this word means? Do you know what that word is?
Quiescent?
Yeah, do you know what it means?
I hear the word acquiescent frequently. I don't know. Quiescent?
Not even Max knows what it means. That's how stupid this man is.
Quiescent? Click on it.
Mm-hmm.
No. I've never heard that word. Spell that.
Okay, based on this description of the word, I want you to tell me if he's used it correctly in this sentence. Let me find it.
In a state or period of inactivity. Or
Nope, not over there.
dormancy.
Not over
Okay.
there. Over here. Over here. Q-U-I-E. There we go. Okay. Now I don't know where the sentence starts because, you know, captions.
Inactivity or dormancy. Okay. Show me the sentence.
Well, this is where quiescent falls, so I determined it did not make sense, but
Is this like the captioning accurate? Can
yes,
I, like,
the
hear
captioning
what
is
he
accurate.
says?
The captioning is correct. So
Could you play me what he says?
I'm trying not to lose my spot. 512, guys. 512. Huh?
Creative and extroverted, then you have both of those working against you in terms of
Hearing it makes it more confusing. So that's why I wanted you to just read it, because him talking, he goes a lot. So it's very frustrating and annoying.
Listen to it.
Yeah.
I just want to see if it's gonna make any more sense to me.
Also, Rookie says hello.
Hello.
creative and extroverted, then you have both of those working against you in terms of your quiescent adaptation to the school environment. If you're disagreeable, which is also more likely if you're male, then you're...
He used it correctly.
He used it correctly?
Yeah.
Because I replaced it with inactive and it didn't make any fucking sense to me. What is an inactive adaptation?
But it's about your state. So he said a quiescent adaptation. Let me think. Like, okay.
Now Max having to jump through hoops to make this make sense. Huh?
I've never heard that word used. I've literally
And you're
never...
pretentious as fuck, which is why I had to know. If this man, I knew he probably was more pretentious than you because it's Jordan fucking Peterson, but there are very few big words that you've not heard of. So, in the English language,
Quiescent.
Max is teaching English. Max is learning English.
I'm learning. I am. My God. Okay.
Learning more useless words for you to know, and you could just say normal things like inert or inactive or latent or passive.
Play it again. This is the last time I'm going to ask you to play it. I'm just trying
positive
to
emotion, then you're going to appear more hyperactive. If you're creative, then your attention is going to be fragmented in some sense by the multiplicity of your interests. So if you're creative and extroverted, then you have both of those working against you in terms of your quiescent adaptation to the school environment. If you're disagreeable, which is also more likely if you're male,
So he's
then...
saying that the better word to use would have been your, like, passive adaptation to the school environment. That seems like a better word.
Which is technically a similar word.
What he's trying to say, I believe, is that, like, the way to adapt to the environment was to essentially not, like,
Be there.
react.
Yeah, not
it's
to be
just
there.
to passively be there. So
Because he's talking about hyperactivity, so that would make sense.
Okay, can you play the pronunciation of this word?
Quiescent.
It is quiescent. Yeah, no, I've never heard that word in my life. Interesting.
Max is English, born by English. Matter of fact, Max was molded by English.
Puzzled.
Yes, that is Jordan Peterson in a
This is the second
nutshell.
word that I have learned this week that I had never heard before that was not a science word. Or was that last week?
What was the other one? What was the other one we Googled earlier? Oh, I don't have the tab open anymore.
Jern, I love learning new words.
Because they were talking about covenants. I don't remember what it was. I think it was in the other video. I kept having to Google. Oh, axiomatically?
Axiomatically? So, like, along an axis?
No.
What does axiomatically mean? Obviously true. And
there's another one.
Therefore does not need to be disproven. Okay. He used that word?
Yes, a lot. He used it a lot. Over and over and over again. I agree.
Axiomatically.
He used it like 6 times in one sentence, didn't you guys?
Can you show me the etymology?
In here? Would that be in here?
It might be in there.
There's Miriam down here.
Yeah. Should be able to scroll down. Example sentences, written examples from the web.
Here we go.
There we go.
Max needs to watch this guy to learn English. If Max wants to learn more useless English words, then yeah.
More about how to be pretentious, I believe.
And sound like a
that
cunt,
if you
like
can
this man.
articulate your position in words that the average person can understand,
That makes you smarter.
That is true knowledge.
Yeah. Being able to explain things like rocket science in terms that a child could understand is far more difficult than explaining it with all the big words that scientists understand.
Axiomatically is a word that I'd be much more likely to use than quiescent.
Never do it. I will slap you.
If I use the word axiomatically?
Yes, I will actually physically attack you.
Just, there's so many other
There's
words.
so many better words.
There are other words that you could use to get your point across, but you want to sound smart.
Yes, that's literally his whole job.
That's the problem. If you're trying to sound smart, people who aren't smart will think that you sound more smart, but people who are smart will think you sound dumb.
Or be very confused because they're like, what are these words you're using?
That's his whole point.
Because I'm not very smart. So a lot of what he says goes right over my head and I have to pause, go back, read it like 6 times, Google a couple of the words to throw in synonyms instead. And then I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense.
Because he wants people to think that they are less smart because he's using a big word.
Yeah, that's how he functions. That's why everyone thinks he's an intellectual, because he uses big words.
And also probably why it's hard to debate him, because he doesn't say what he means in plain English.
Yes, it's absolutely impossible to debate him, and there are countless debates out there between him and, like, your average newscaster where they get really puzzled and confused because of the way he words things, it backs them into a corner, and not in, like, a debate way, but in, like, a I don't know how to respond to you because I don't know what you're saying type way.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, got you, libtard, blah, you know, and it's like, no, I just don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Just use normal words so people can understand your points. But if he uses more normal words, more people will understand that what he's saying
isn't that intellectual
bullshit.
or
it's not
correct.
Intellectual, and it's not the kind of position that anyone with well-rounded knowledge of the world should take. So.
Yeah, he's talking about ADHD, so I figured I would indulge myself and listen to him talk about how I'm not real. Most people don't have ADHD
as a whole is not real.
Well, he's saying that most people don't have ADHD because boys are just hyperactive naturally.
It is overdiagnosed, certainly, but
That's what I said.
Should still be diagnosed.
Yeah.
It's overdiagnosed in boys, underdiagnosed in girls.
For reasons that we already know.
If we can ever meet in the middle, that will be a good day.
Yeah.
But he is talking about boys specifically, I'm sure.
Yes, he mentions girls a couple times, but he's mainly talking about boys. He mentioned a study done with rats. Because that's an accurate representation of how humans interact, apparently. And the reason we do studies on rats is to do those studies on rats to make sure they are safe before we perform them on humans. Not so that we can then pull these studies from that and say, oh, this is exactly how it's going to function in a human. No, it's the preemptive before the human trials. It's what you do to show that it's not going to kill the person. And he keeps mentioning Ritalin, which he should be mentioning Adderall, which is what the majority of... Well, he's talking about ADD. He keeps mentioning ADD, which is more commonly what Ritalin is used for. Whereas ADHD more commonly is used for Adderall because you need that norepinephrine as a person with hyperactivity disorder. But he keeps mentioning hyperactivity, and then earlier he said attention deficit disorder, which are not the same thing. There's not hyperactivity in attention deficit disorder. That's why it's a subsection of ADHD. And I'm like... you're a psychologist. You should know shit about ADHD. Like, that's, I know you got your degree in the 90s, but like.
He's surely not licensed. Is he licensed?
He teaches. He's a teacher.
But does he practice?
I don't think so.
Then I don't trust him. Because if he doesn't practice, then he doesn't have to do continuing education.
Exactly. That's what I said. See, guys, I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong about things.
Obviously, as a professor, you would want to do continuing education, but
you're generally supposed to.
Yeah. Some colleges require you to publish a certain number of articles or do a certain number of talks or something to stay, to maintain.
He resigned from employment of Toronto and became a chancellor at a college, a liberal arts education project.
Okay.
Oh yeah, he got people were mad at him because he was. Being a shithead, so and people were like, I can't believe he's getting fired, and when he resigned, so.
Yeah, but he might have been pressured to resign, who knows?
Yeah, he resigned because he didn't like that he wasn't able to spout nonsense anymore. The fact that they allowed this man who talks like this to be I would hate to be a professor in this man's class. The way I would off myself if I got assigned to his class and I didn't have any other option because no one else was teaching the class, but I needed it for my degree. No, change the degrees. I'm changing my degree.
A lot of times, positions like professorships, faculty, and like higher ups will give you the opportunity to resign rather than directly firing you as a professional
it looks better.
courtesy.
That's what Kroger often does.
Yeah, it's a professional courtesy because they don't want to like ruin your
Ability to get a new job.
Yeah, because if you are fired as a professor, unless the reason you were fired is something
like
that another
layoffs
college
or something,
would consider a benefit,
yeah.
then unless it was a layoff or like I was fired for like speaking my opinion, then you're really kind of fucked. So.
Yeah, he was having a discussion with a bunch of old white men about like the contract between men and God, and they were all trying to sound intellectual, but he was doing it absolutely the most. But they were all very much trying their best. Mr. Pragerman was there and mentioned some Jewiness because he's a Jew. When someone brought up Jews, and he was like, "Oh, finally, my turn to speak," and then he started saying things. So.
Oh yeah, that's still right. He was licensed by the college, and then now they're in judicial review. Fun.
After a professional misconduct complaint.
Yeah.
About his communication and the boundaries he sets with patients. Well, his communication is fucking ass. So his communication skills are also just ass. So that doesn't help.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to know I'm not the only one who had never heard of this word before. So.
Nope. Quiescent.
I was like, if Max has never heard of it before, then that means it's super pretentious.
I enjoy big words because sometimes a big word is better than a small word. But the big words that you have shown me today are not better than small words that could be used instead.
Because you'll use a big word sometimes that I don't know or that I've heard you use before, but I can't remember what it means. And I'm like, can you dumb that down for me, please? Yeah. Just use the simple word next time, please. Thank you.
I just choose not to explain the words that I use until you ask because I don't want to, like, think that I think that you forgot something.
Yeah, which is why I always ask when I'm like, sorry, what? What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I do use
acquiesce. What the fuck?
I do use my fair share of big words. See, I think acquiesce is better than give in. I like the word acquiesce, so I'm going to use it. But I'm not going to use, axiomatically? Unnecessary.
I wish my universe lecturer responsible for teaching us encryption was fired. None of us had a clue what he was on about. He always had 150 plus slides and rushed through the last 100 in the last 30 minutes of a 2-hour lecture. We were put in the same class as PhD students. We certainly raised out complaints to the highest level.
Yeah. I hate those. Oh my god. I've been in classes where the professor has had a, graduate adjunct class or honors adjunct classes or both, where we just all get the same lecture, and they're like, oh, we'll just make it harder for those students instead of making it actually
medium
equitable. Yeah, make it medium for everyone instead of pretending that this is the easy version.
Yeah, when you got a class of mixed of 3rd and 5th graders, you teach it at a 4th grade level to make life easier for everybody.
Yeah. Instead of
teaching it at a 7th grade level.
Instead of pretending that this 400 level class can be modified for honors and graduate students, and that it's not a graduate class, just figure your shit out and teach separate classes. Teach honors and grad together. That would make sense. And then just let the rest of us normies live alone. That would make sense.
Just leave me alone.
God, that grinds my gears so much. I am so glad I didn't try to do an honors degree. Overrated. So overrated. If you're trying to get into, law school or something, do honors. But otherwise, it's so stupid. Unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is very unnecessary and expensive.
Yeah. The only reason you should do honors for an English degree is if you're going to law school.
Yeah.
No other reason.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even need that. Well, it might be helpful if you're trying to do a PhD in something, but, it's
if you're going on to if you're going to do more stuff after, then it makes sense. But if you're not doing more stuff after, it doesn't make sense to graduate with honors. It doesn't fucking matter. No one's going to care. No. If you graduate with honors with a fucking film degree, no one's going to give a shit. Huh? Genuinely one of the worst decisions of my life. It's barely a competition. It's in the top 5. Well, it was the worst issue was to do it in the first place. That's what I mean. I got 3 C's in my college career, and 2 of them were in honors courses.
I'm just glad I was blindsided by the fact that I was eligible to be in the honors college, and I therefore never followed up on the fact that somebody had told me I was eligible to be in the honors college, and I just never joined.
Yeah, and the third class was a history class, so of course I got a C in it, because most people get C's in their history class.
If anyone had told me that I was eligible to be part of the honors college before I applied to the school, I would have done that, and I would have graduated with honors, and there would have been no point to doing that.
And you would have been fine, because you're good at writing essays. It would not have been extra work for you, the way it was for me.
It would have been a lot of extra work.
Not really. The difference between an honors course and a non-honors course is like a slightly longer project and an extra paper. That's it.
In English, it's a lot longer.
Not necessarily.
It's like your 5-page paper is a 15-page paper now.
Yeah.
That's not great.
Yeah, but for you,
listen, okay.
That's not as much extra work. Whereas for me, that's 38 extra years of effort taken off my life.
By the time I got to the last year of college, an extra 10 pages would have been nothing. But the first year of college, that I would not have been able to do that. I would not have been able to survive.
What do you mean? What would you have done, Jimmy? Which one of us, and what are you talking about? Because I know there's a slight delay on the chat overall. It's like a few seconds, so. Or a delay on my video or whatever, so.
Life is delayed somehow.
Always and forever.
Honestly, I kind of enjoyed writing papers. I didn't have that many to write the last semester of college, and I kind of missed it.
Oh, the alternative course was just to not do honors. That was it. Still get a film degree, just not do the honors college. That was the alternate course, which would have saved me a lot of fucking effort and stress and sadness, and I wouldn't have had to take multiple summer courses to fix my GPA after my first fucking semester of college. Because I got 2 C's in my first semester of college, so my GPA was ass, and I was at risk of losing my scholarship, so I had to take summer courses to bring my GPA back up to the appropriate level, so they would continue to give me money. Would have saved me so much struggle and effort. And sadness. What was the thing? Oh, I looked up, what's the union between God and the people called? Covenant, that word. So I went to Google covenant to be like, that means the same thing as contract, right? The school that just got shut up here is called Covenant. So I typed in covenant, and I was like, why is it showing me about the shooting? And I was like, oh, it's the name of the school. What? Because it's a religious school, and it was a religious video that I was Googling covenant for, so, but they kept trying to talk about covenant and contracts as if it was some, like, there was literally a sentence that was, like, 4 paragraphs long, where Peterson just described the definition of contract 4 times, over and over again, in different ways, and I was like...
Where he's talking about the word covenant?
Or a contract, he was talking about the word contract, and he described it twice. Like, the like, something ethos of... the contract is that both parties follow it or something like that, but like far more stupid and intellectual. And I was just like, you just described what a contract is. Yes, of course that's part of it, because that's what a contract is. A contract is an agreement between 2 people to follow the rules. And then if you break that, you've broken the contract. That's what a contract is. I was just like, I hate this man. You just described one of the most well-known words that are out there. Everyone knows what a contract is, okay? Like, it doesn't need you to describe it on an 8th level intellect. You know what I mean? Like, what does 8th priority valid mean? No idea. I don't think the captions understood what he was saying, so I think the captions were wrong.
The last time I talked about like ethos and pathos in school
English class
was in rhetoric class when we were reviewing presidential speeches after mass shootings. Because that was shortly after.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
We were also reviewing Sandy Hook.
Yeah, I think I remember. Were we knew each other at that point?
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
no, we didn't.
We didn't.
We sort of did. I think by
I feel like I remember that specific thing.
I was taking that class in spring of 2019. I thought I had finished that paper about the political cartoon from the synagogue shooting, but I may not have finished it yet. So I think I had started writing it in February, possibly. So I may have been in process of writing it when we re-met.
Because I feel like I remember somebody talking about that. It may not have been you, but that specific prompt sounds familiar.
I emailed the author to see if he would allow me to submit his cartoon along with my essay about it to our student journal, and he was like, "Oh my god, yes, that's so exciting! I'm so glad you're doing that."
Yeah, I
It's
do
so
remember
sweet.
that. Yeah.
It was very sweet.
People love it, like, especially people who, like, write these long-ass fucking scientific papers and stuff. Love it when you're like, hey, can I use your paper for this? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. Here's a copy of it, you know?
Yeah, a lot of times those, like...
Like, I spent 70 hours on this. Yes, please use it. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of times, like, academic articles and stuff published to, like, famous journals cost, like, $60 to get a copy of it online. But if you email the author, they're like, oh my god, I want someone to read what I wrote.
Yeah, because they don't get any of that money. They don't get any of that money,
Yeah,
so...
but, like, some random student learning about something they spent many, many hours on, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
we had Jarek in here today at one point. I do believe he has passed away at this point. And, yeah.
Jarek.
He came in drunk and said, I probably won't be here long. And Rookie was here. I don't know if he's still here in the background. He's in Germany.
Oh, he's in Germany. Okay.
Yeah. Rookie is still here in the background somewhere, but has not spoken in some time. So.
I was just wondering if Jarek was afternoon drunk or night drunk. So.
Night drunk.
I mean, if he's off work, who cares?
I think he's drunk most of the time, though, from what I could tell.
As long as he's not drunk at work.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah, I had two other randos pop by as well. Well, not randos. We had Mathlete here for a short period of time, and then some random person who popped in for a few minutes. So. Yeah, Mathlete hasn't been here in a minute, so I was like, "Who the fuck are you? Hello." Oh yeah, I've got to go to the USPS and get my vinyl.
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay.
They've had it since like last Monday, so.
Last Monday?
Yeah, something like that.
Lol. I don't know at what point they send it back or if they ever send it back.
They won't send it back.
They don't?
They won't. There's not a return. You can't return it. Don't return it. Please, don't return it. Don't return it. It took so long to get here. Don't return it.
Okay, well, Google it.
No, it'll be fine. Okay. If I get there tomorrow and they've returned it, I'll just burn the place down.
Maybe don't do that.
Gotta keep the day interesting. I will have had my name changed by then, so they can't stop me from changing my name for running from the law.
I was watching Hassan's stream and he was talking about the shooting. And he said that Tennessee lawmakers would sooner ban children from being in public than ban
guns in any capacity. Anyway. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we tried to watch a little bit of Fox News coverage of it because we figured Fox News coverage, if any of the coverage was going to be interesting, it would be that coverage. Mm-hmm. And it was just the same stupid fucking nonsense of, oh, we should protect our children in the schools by, like putting metal detectors in police houses. I'm like, or we could just ban assault rifles.
Law and Crime did put up the body cam footage, but it was direct release from the police. It didn't look like it was heavily edited, but it was obviously pixelated.
Yeah, yeah.
So...
bodies and all that.
Yeah. I think there was only... Hassan was, like, skimming through it before he played it for us, because, he didn't want...
TOS, yeah.
TOS, but it was TOS safe. And... Yeah.
Nico, break some speeding and other road rules before you change your name. I speed everywhere, so yeah. Check. I also roll through most of the stop signs that I see, especially ones that I go through every day, like the work ones. I roll through those motherfuckers all the time. The ones here, I roll through those.
There were so many cops on the road when I was trying to do the normal person speeding moment, because I was, like, literally, I left the house at such a time that I would have gotten to the doctor on time at 3:30. Mm-hmm. There was construction and an accident, and then more construction after the accident. My ETA got up to 3:54 at one point, and I almost cried and turned around and went home. But I didn't. I persevered, and I managed to shave off that time. So. Yeah,
well, you should know better, because between here and Louisville there's going to be 80 miles of construction because they construct everything all the time for no fucking reason.
It's mostly only in Tennessee. Like,
no, but they did it on Bluegrass Parkway all of the time. There was always construction on Bluegrass.
Right, but at least in Kentucky...
To the degree you could plan for it.
At least in Kentucky, it typically stays 3 lanes through the construction as much as possible. Whereas in Tennessee, it's always 2 lanes.
The school shooter apparently owns 7 legal guns.
Damn, that's new.
Holy fuck, that's way too many guns.
Well, I know they had 3 on them, and they had more at home, so...
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to own an assault rifle, fine. But you don't need to own 2 assault rifles. That's not necessary. Okay? I don't think you should own 1. But you definitely don't need to own more than 1. You know what I mean? Like, that's a bit much. It's a bit much. What's for dinner tonight?
I don't know. I'm just hungry and tired.
Mood.
So, yeah, whatever you want is fine. But Hassan showed screenshots of a message between the shooter and one of their friends before they committed the shooting. They texted them like right before, and the friend called the cops, and the cops were like, call the non-emergency number, and by the time they connected through the non-emergency number, it was too late. Because that's how it works.
Like, I'm calling you about my friend who is about to shoot up a school. Why am I calling a non-emergency number?
The shooter signed their text to their friend, Audrey parentheses Aiden, and the friend responded, Audrey. So
I think it's a new to transition situation.
It must have been.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't they have put Aiden parentheses? It doesn't matter. It's still confusing.
I'm so confused at the transness of it all. I think that's the most interesting part about it, because that's the only part of it that's unique. So sadly, the dead children aren't the unique part of the story, but
yeah. One of my other coworkers, well, she lives out in Mount Juliet, but she is a mom with kids that are this age, and so she texted me like, are you okay? Because she didn't know like how close we are to the shooting. We're like 20-minute drive away.
I mean, we were over there the night before for the movie. We went to Green Hills for the movies.
Yeah.
Which is near the school. It's like down the street.
Yeah. But I told her, we're like 20 minutes away. We're fine. I'm glad I'm not a child in school.
Ain't got no kids, and definitely not sending them no private religious school.
She literally has an 8-year-old and a 10 or 11-year-old.
Yeah.
So I asked her if she was okay, and I was like, this is just becoming more and more common. It's kind of sad. And I was talking about the fact that, like, I didn't have shooting drills, but that's only because I was homeschooled.
Yep.
Like, if
we've had shooting drills since elementary school.
Yeah.
I remember them starting in elementary school.
But, I mean, she is probably in her late 40s. So, I mean, she only experienced, like, tornado drills, fire drills.
Oh, we had those too.
Yeah. Also,
fire, earthquake, tornadoes, shootings.
I had earthquake drills at... No, not earthquake, fire... What drills did we have? No, we just had tornado drills. I think we would be also...
We have fire drills, Jimmy says.
I think it was tornado and fire at...
Because y'all don't really get tornadoes over there, do y'all? It's not really a thing in the UK, tornadoes.
Okay, I think they maybe call them something different. Tornado's an American word.
Oh.
But...
the spinny fast things that tear the shit up.
I don't know the same thing, but there are such things as tornadoes in lots of other places around the world. They're just called different things. That's the American word. But,
we don't get anything, Jimmy says.
Yeah, mostly just rain.
Just cloudy, rainy all the time.
What was I going to say? Oh, I went to a co-op that was in a school attached to a church. So we really should have been preparing for human-created disasters, but whatever.
Well, I think this is the first one at a private school, isn't it?
Huh?
I think this is the first one, or not at a private school, but at a religious school, isn't it?
Religious school?
I think this is the first one at a religious school.
I'll turn off my timer. I'm not sure.
We call it strong winds because that's all the time.
I mean, most of the time...
He said we call it strong winds because that's all it is by the time that they reach us.
Oh, yeah, because it's such a small place.
Yeah.
And it's not really the climate.
No.
It's not like vast stretches of open plains.
Yeah, or in near warm waters where tornadoes or hurricanes tend to form. It's all the way up where it's cold already. So, and because of the way the system works, it would push it down from the top anyway, so they wouldn't be able to get hurricanes there really. The closest y'all would get to hurricanes is like one that ran up our side and then pushed its way out into the Atlantic. And maybe you'd feel some winds from that, but that's really about it.
I think hurricanes are very specific to the climate of
this
side of the
it's a tropical thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And because we stretch from the tropics all the way up to the cold, and the way the underwater currents work, push it up the coast as well. So
it has to be a very specific mix of temperatures and climate.
It's why the water on the East Coast is so warm, but the water on the West Coast is so cold. Because the West Coast comes down from Alaska, same as it does over in the UK. It comes down from the Arctic. Storm Eunice was our worst one lately. Never heard of it.
We only hear about stuff when it strengthens into like a...
Biggest in history.
Storm Eunice?
Yeah, I think that's EUNICE.
I don't... My phone's in there. It's plugged in.
Google.
Learning things.
Typing. Oh, that was last year. Holy shit.
It was a cyclone.
So helpful. The Guardian. Disgusting. Ooh.
Golly. Spooky pictures.
Love some waves. Only 4 people died. Rookie numbers. 122 miles per hour is pretty good, though.
Yeah. Wow.
Worst since Burns Day storm 32 years ago, where 47 people died. So y'all don't die from storms like ever, is what I'm hearing.
Well, America is also more people, more extremes of temperature, more variety of different.
I know, we're just better at all the things
we can have.
We're better at everything, Max. Including murdering our children in their schools.
Yeah. Because we have so many different, like, biomes in America.
Yeah, it hit the needles the worst, too, so it entered up from the bottom. Yeah. You build your houses out of cardboard, that's true. It's true. It's true. Woman was killed in her car after a tree fell on it. Another one, 2 falling tree deaths. Debris death. Tree death. Three tree deaths and 1 debris death. Fucking trees, man. Gotta watch out for those fuckers. Especially in hurricane zones. Yeah, we build them out of cardboard on purpose. Because if it's built out of super heavy material and that gets thrown around, it causes a lot more damage than the lightweight, quote-unquote, cardboard stuff.
And also we're poor, and that's cheaper.
Yeah. They're built to sort of break away the same way NASCAR vehicles are meant to break away.
Are they?
Yeah. They're raised up higher so they don't flood, but then if they're hit by like a tornado or the actual like wind part of the hurricane and pieces break off, those pieces are made to break off in such a way where it doesn't hurt people as much, because it's very common for them to hit those areas. And that's usually what kills people is the debris, not the winds themselves or, trees falling on them, debris hitting them from houses and things like that. They're usually nailed down pretty well, but when they come off, it's not like bricks, you know what I mean? So
you are going to want good natural disaster protection, though.
Oh yeah, I'm moving to a hurricane or a tornado zone.
There you go.
Same thing.
You got there.
One just has water. A hurricane, just a water tornado. I don't know what to tell you.
But yeah, I don't. Richmond is kind of insulated from a lot of different types of natural disasters because it's too far south for nor'easters, too far east for tornadoes, too far inland for hurricanes. Like, I'm riding. Nowhere near an earthquake zone.
I mean, hurricanes. That's the one thing.
It's a little too far inland for hurricanes to really be a problem.
Well, yeah, you won't get like flooding. You'll get wind and stuff, but you won't get flooding. You're far enough inland, you won't get flooding.
Flash flooding, for sure. But, like...
I mean, not necessarily, actually, because you're like...
It's very central.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about moving down here.
Yeah.
But
that's
I can't
like
afford it.
An hour and a half away.
I can't afford it.
Norfolk is. Or, oh, no, Virginia Beach is an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
So it's not super far.
Yeah, but if anything made it up in here, it's not going to reach y'all. I mean, it's got these waterways in here, which might flood. Mm-hmm. But that's really about it. Mm-hmm. Is if it gets big surges in there that makes it that far inland. But that rarely happens, to my knowledge, that it makes it that far inland. Mm-hmm. Unless it runs literally right up the coast, which it does sometimes, y'all won't feel it. Which they rarely, usually by the time it usually hits this and sort of kicks it out. So it doesn't usually run all the way up to New York. It's usually with hurricanes and stuff.
Oh, Newport News? They showed Newport News out there. That's the town where all of the women who did all the math calculations to put man on the moon lived.
Good for them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The black women that they decided not to credit because they're
from Hidden Figures?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to melt my brain for the next 3 minutes with the rest of this video. You're welcome to join me if you would like.
I gotta take a shower.
Yeah. Then we can eat.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jordan Peterson is so fucking exhausting, man. I'm going to pay this bill after I finish stream as well. The $6 bill that I owe. I owe Planned Parenthood $6.69.
Yeah.
Nice. Huh? In my area, the Somerset levels are the most likely to flood from heavy constant rain. Yep. I mean, that's the one thing y'all got to worry about, our flooding, is because it rains all the goddamn time over there. That's like the main concern I would imagine y'all have to deal with on a regular basis, is flooding. Because it's constantly stormy and rainy and wet and damp and dark and gross and sad.
I don't know how you do it with depression in England. Like, Jesus.
Yeah, forget sad, seasonal depression. It's just always there. Wales certainly does. Yeah, Scotland apparently does. It gets a lot of it too because it's even farther north, so it's just cold a lot more often up there. No seasonal depression, just depression.
Yes.
Just
all
constant depression.
Are seasonal for depression.
Yes, just depression all the time. It's the British depression. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the Brits have a stiff upper lip.
Yes. And no joy in their hearts. I mean, we're getting there too, let's be honest. We're getting there. Joy in our hearts? What the fuck is that? What is joy? What is that?
Joy?
Yeah, what does that mean? What does that even mean?
Never heard.
Good night, rookie. Go to bed.
Go to sleep, rookie.
I'm also fucking tired. I'm gonna have to take an early nap tonight because I gotta be up at 9 in the fucking morning.
That's true.
Go to court. Disgusting.
Bye, friends.
Bye. Goodbye forever.
I'll never see you again.
Goodbye. Ugh. Y'all better cherish these moments where I get to summon Max. It's not gonna happen much more. Only got a couple months left of that. Back to this fucking sludge.
This has indicated that if you give any child amphetamines, the grip of what they're attending to is stronger. So all children are calmed down by stimulants perversely because the psychomotor...
That's not true. People who don't have ADHD aren't necessarily calmed down by stimulants. They are more focused on stimulants, but people with ADHD who are on stimulants are more focused in a normal capacity, whereas people who already have a fairly normal ability to focus when put on stimulants are so aggressively focused that they essentially become hyperactive. And that, like, they can sit down and get, like, 40 pages written of, like, the book they've been working on for 3 months in, like, a very aggressive, like, gritty way. They're essentially on a high. Is essentially the way it has been explained to me by people who have done it who don't have ADHD.
Stimulant, which is a dopamine agonist, which activates the focal exploratory system, does increase the capacity for focal attention. But it does that with all children, and so...
Focal attention. Focal attention. Focal attention. Focal attention? Focal attention. Okay, it's a psychology word defined by the APA. Active concentration on particular stimuli to the exclusion of others. So just attention. Versus non-focal attention. Non-focal attention is focusing on a stimulus while simultaneously being exposed to other stimuli. So no multitasking. It's a focus on a single thing instead of multitasking. Ugh, I hate psychology words sometimes. They're so redundant. Okay. At least it's a real word.
A positive reaction to amphetamine in relationship to attentional focus is no indication whatsoever, even in the most minute manner, that the diagnosis was correct. And so, I don't buy it, except in these rare cases, is that we use amphetamines to conveniently modify the behavior of bored boys because we're too stupid to construct our education systems in a manner that doesn't drive them mad. Look, you know, normal university students take Ritalin like mad in university because they learn that they can sustain attention, whether that's productive or not in the long run is a whole different.
And it keeps them awake as well. That's another perk to a stimulant, is it keeps you awake so you can work longer hours and things like that. Yeah, right, I know.
Issue, but they can sustain attention with less effort if they use amphetamines. Now, that's a degenerating game, fundamentally, like most drug use. And I suppose if it's very carefully regulated and the doses are low, then the negative consequences are less dramatic. But I think the whole thing's just, it's a psychosocial fraud. It's a, what do they call that? When a system produces there's a name for a disease that's created by doctors. I can't remember it. What's the word? Iatrogenic? Iatrogenic? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, hyperactivity is an iatrogenic disease created by schools. Yeah, that's the case. So boys should play more, way more than they do, way more. They should play to the point of exhaustion in some sense every day. Really, really.
I mean, quit when they technically all kids should, because kids are hyperactive, period, just in general. Kids are hyperactive and have a lot of extra energy, and it makes it hard for them to go to sleep a lot of times with or without ADHD. So having kids play, which a lot of kids do, especially young children, like early elementary school kids play a lot, is important, that they wear themselves out, essentially.
They've had enough.
Oh my God. I hate that I can see what he's about to say. Okay. Because what he's about to argue about is a fundamental basis of ADHD.
I bet your hyperactive son has no trouble paying attention when he's playing video games. Well, that's worth thinking about, isn't it?
Because that's how ADHD works.
Welcome to the Creator Line.
Hello? I did not click to the next video.
What are your thoughts on?
That's how ADHD works. ADHD it wants to focus on things that make it happy. And video games, for example, or whatever hyperfixation you may have, which hyperfixation is generally more associated with autism than it is with ADHD, but hyperfixation is absolutely a thing in ADHD as well, separate from the hyperfixations that people with autism have. And the reason video games is so often one of those is because video games often give a constant stream of dopamine the same way TikTok does, for example. For me, it was TV and movies growing up was my thing, was what I could sit down and I could watch 10 hours of television with no problem whatsoever. I struggle with that now. If I'm even a little bit bored by what I'm watching, I'll pull out my phone and start scrolling through Twitter. So, you know, social media specifically is very good at giving that constant stream on dopamine, of dopamine that the brain is looking for, because it doesn't have all the dopamine that it needs, and stuff like that. So that's why the kid will be able to focus on painting or TikTok or video games or music constantly all the time forever, but not be able to do their homework. That's just a normal part of ADHD that has been known for a while. So, yeah. Dr. Peterson. Yeah, shut up. Yeah. I mean, this is the only part of it that he said that made sense, was that our education system is designed in such a manner that it drives kids mad. I mean, that's absolutely correct, especially kids with ADHD who need the stimulation. So I unfortunately have to agree with that one. This is terrible advice. You absolutely should live with your significant other before marriage. I know you all can't read it, which is why I'm reading it out loud. Oh my God, is this bitch in Nashville as well?
Welcome back to the comment section. I'm Brett Cooper. I think you guys have probably
Is female Ben Shapiro here as well?
seen the news already, so I don't really need to.
Tell me she doesn't look like a female Ben Shapiro. Tell me this does not look like Ben Shapiro post-transition.
Introduce this topic, but I'll give you a bit of a backstory.
The only difference is her voice is deeper than his.
Shooting yesterday in Nashville at a private Christian school in Green Hills, which is one of our neighborhoods. It was called the Covenant School, and it was a school that was part of.
Why are they all here?
Covenant Presbyterian Church, which is in Green Hills. 3 children, all of whom were 9, and 3 adults in their 60s were killed. And yesterday, as all of the news was coming out, I stayed pretty quiet. And I posted this on my Instagram story early this morning as I was working on this episode. But it is very odd to be in a public position where people expect you and want you to comment on things right away and have an opinion on something right away. And I just did not feel comfortable in the 24 hours since this happened. We have a lot more information, and I feel a bit more comfortable speaking about this.
So she does live here. Every day I find another reason to get the fuck out of this state. God damn. All right.
When it comes to humans, there's nothing.
I actually want to put this in my regular watch later, not on this one.
When it comes.
Okay. Okay. That is gonna do it for today. Switch back so I can upload. Yep, I gotta go pay my $7 that I still owe for blood work. We'll save the mind numbingness for some other time as well. Okay.
Let's say, hypothetically, I'm a Barbie girl. Okay, and let's even say I'm in a Barbie world. Right, so in this scenario, I would obviously know from personal experience that life in plastic is fantastic. Wouldn't it be reasonable to assume you could brush my hair and undress me literally everywhere? Imagination you can derive from the fundamentals.
No. No, that's the end of the stream. We're done. See you tomorrow, maybe. I'll let you know. Keep you updated on Discord as to whether tomorrow will happen or not. I'm going to plan to start at the normal time tomorrow, 2:30, 3 o'clock, a little later than the normal time, I guess. But, yeah, I'll let you know if that changes, of course. So, I will see you when I see you. Good night and goodbye.